Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I just wanted to get home after a long day at the office, but my evening took a terrifying turn when I noticed someone following me. Leaving work at my usual time, I began the 10-minute walk to my apartment like I do every weekday. At first, everything seemed normal. I walked at a brisk pace along the tree-lined sidewalks of my neighborhood, enjoying the fresh air after being cooped up all day. About 2 blocks into my journey, I got an uneasy prickling feeling on the back of my neck. I casually glanced back over my shoulder. That's when I first spotted him, a man in a dark hoodie walking about half a block behind me. He looked slightly out of place along this route I took home every day. I quickly faced forward again, shrugging it off. Could just be a coincidence. But over the next few minutes, my sense of unease grew. Each time I discreetly peeked back, he was there, matching my pace exactly, staying the same distance behind me. I noticed him ducking partially behind a tree or crouching down to tie his shoe. Every time I looked like he didn't want me to catch him staring. My heart started pounding as I picked up speed. So did he. The sidewalks were mostly empty except for the two of us. I felt incredibly alone, vulnerable, hunted. I took a sudden detour down a different street, one I never normally took, just to see if he would follow. The sound of quick footsteps echoed behind me, matching each hurried step I took. He was still there. Panic flooded my veins. I was definitely being followed. Fumbling for my phone with shaky, sweaty hands, I tried to pull up my contacts to call someone, my roommate, the police, anyone. But it slipped through my fingers, skidding across the rough concrete sidewalk. No time to stop and grab it. Survival. Instinct took over and I broke into a full sprint, my work shoes pinching my feet with each frantic stride. Gasping for air, I covered the last 2 blocks to my apartment building in what felt like seconds. I rushed through the lobby door, slamming it shut in his face. The glass rattled violently as I saw him approaching from the other side just before it closed. I sprinted up the 3 flights of stairs, legs burning, lungs aching. Reaching my floor, I barreled down the hallway to my apartment. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. After what seemed like an eternity of fumbling, I slipped inside and threw the deadbolt. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. Peering through the peephole, I saw him round the corner. The hooded man ran toward my door, his face obscured in shadow. I stood there paralyzed, watching as he grasped the handle and it pushed violently several times. The door rattled, booming against the deadbolt again and again. He shoved his shoulder against it forcefully. After what seemed like forever, he stopped throwing his weight against it. Through the tiny glass, I could see him standing there, hands still, gripping the handle. My heart thundered in my ears, pulse racing. Then he looked up, straight at me through the peephole, and grinned slowly before, releasing his grip and walking away down the hall. The terror was all-consuming. He knew exactly where I lived. My safe haven had become compromised. He could come back whenever he wanted. I wanted to call the police right away, but with my phone still outside on the sidewalk, I had no way to contact anyone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't believe this was happening. Crawling on shaky limbs in my closet, I retrieved the old metal baseball bat that had always been stashed away collecting dust. At least now I had something to defend myself if needed. Clutching the bat tightly, I crept to each window to make sure they were locked up tight. My stalker could be lurking anywhere outside, waiting for a chance to get in. I'd never felt so exposed and unsettled in my own home before. I was too afraid to sleep, riddled with anxiety about what might happen if I let my guard down. I sat vigilant in a chair angled near the front door all night long. Each small noise made me jump. Every shadow that passed in the street lay outside looked like the stalker coming back for me. When morning finally came, I gathered the courage to go retrieve my phone from the sidewalk where it had fallen. The screen was badly cracked, but still somewhat functional. My fingers trembled as I dialed the police immediately. The dispatcher assured me a patrol car was on its way. Officers arrived quickly, and I described the terrifying encounter in vivid detail. They swept the building but found no trace of the stalker. I knew he could come back at any moment, though. The police said they'd provide extra surveillance to the area, but it was low comfort. I realized my life as I knew it was over. I'd never feel safe here again. I'd be constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was following me, whether I'd be safe outside these walls. He may be gone for now, but the fear would linger. I never expected a chance encounter with an old friend at the mall would lead to me being stalked and terrified right outside my own home. It started out as a pretty normal Saturday. I went to the mall to get some new, business casual work clothes from one of my favorite stores. While waiting in line for a pretzel at the food court, I heard a familiar voice call out my name. I turned to see Josh, a guy I knew from high school, walking up with a big smile. Josh and I had been pretty good friends back in school, but lost touch after graduation when we went to different colleges. We chatted casually in line about how life had been post-high school, reminisced about old times like football games and parties, and promised to properly catch up soon over coffee. After a quick hug, goodbye, I didn't think much else about our brief mall run-in. I finished up my shopping, grabbed a coffee, and headed home. Pulling into my driveway that evening, I noticed a hooded figure in dark clothing, strolling past on the sidewalk. Something about their gait looked familiar. I did a double take before the person turned their face slightly under the street lamp. It was Josh. Alarm bells immediately went off in my head. What was he doing here, right outside my home? I kept watching him in the rearview mirror as I grabbed my bags from the back seat. He had stopped walking once he got a few houses past mine. I could see him, loitering halfway down the block, glancing around while pretending to check his phone. My stomach turned with unease, but I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, movement outside caught my eye. Heart pounding, I peered out the window to see a silhouette standing at the edge of my yard, obscured by shadows. I quickly flipped the porch light on, and there was Josh, staring right at me from the sidewalk. Our eyes locked for a split second before he whirled around and sprinted off down the street. I stood there shaking, curtains clenched tightly in my fist. This wasn't just some coincidence. He had deliberately tracked me down and followed me home. The notion that I was being stalked, hunted by someone I once considered a friend, made my skin crawl. That night, sleep completely eluded me. I kept envisioning Josh lurking right outside my bedroom window, peering in at me. Would he try to break in during the night? What did he want from me? I'd never felt unsafe in my own home before, but now this predator knew exactly where to find me, where I slept at night. No locks could ease the paranoia. Over the next week, more wording signs kept popping up. Strange cars parked across the street at odd hours. A shadowy figure who vanished when I went to look. Late night knocks at the door, but no one there when I checked the peephole. Each incident amped up my anxiety. I considered calling the police, but what could they really do without solid evidence of wrongdoing? I didn't even have Josh's current phone number or address to provide them if asked. And our chance mall run-in gave him a valid excuse to claim he was just happening to be in the neighborhood. Part of me hoped I was being paranoid, that my mind was playing tricks, seeing danger where there was none. But my gut told me something was very wrong. Josh wasn't just some old classmate saying hi. He had deliberately fixated on me for some twisted reason only he knew. The next week was more of the same, more sightings, odd events that felt threatening but contained no proof. I started taking different routes home, avoiding anywhere Josh might pop up. I had my mail held at the post office so he couldn't trace my exact address if he was unsure. But his presence lingered, always watching from somewhere just out of view. The last straw came a few nights later when I arrived home after working late to find Josh once again lurking right outside my front door. Heart lurching into my throat, I confronted him directly for the first time since that initial driveway sighting. "Why are you stalking me? What do you want?" I demanded, anger and fear roiling inside me. Josh just stared calmly with eerily vacant eyes and a chilling grin. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the inky night. Shakily, I called the police and filed a report. They increased patrols around my block, but could still only do so much without proof of wrongdoing. I realized that I'd have to be constantly vigilant now. Josh had become my own personal predator, a ghost from my past who had fixated on me and could show up at any time. I changed my locks, set up security cameras, altered my daily patterns, and drove different routes to and from work, but nothing could fully restore the sense of safety I'd lost. I wondered if someday I'd turn around and see Josh again, his empty eyes, staring, because to a true stalker, I was prey he would never release. This became my uneasy new normal. For weeks I lived in a heightened state of alert, glimpsing Josh in every passing stranger. Any unusual sound at night sent adrenaline spiking. My fight or flight response was maxed out all the time. Exhaustion eventually numbed the fear of it, but I knew a piece of my spirit had been dimmed forever. There would always be a shadow behind me now, real or imagined. And Josh was out there somewhere biding his time, because I had become the unhealthy fixation for a predator who had no intention of letting go. Working as a waitress at a diner, I get hit on a lot. It's part of the job. But one overly persistent customer took it too far by stalking me on my way home. It was a typical busy Friday night shift. I was waiting tables, delivering food and drinks, handling a dozen tasks at once. The diner was packed and I was on my feet, all night, exhausted but working hard for good tips. In the chaos, this one guy seated in my section kept trying to chat me up whenever I came by his table. He was probably in his mid-30s, average-looking with short brown hair and a beer gut. He kept awkwardly asking for my number, trying lame pickup lines and corny jokes, complimenting my looks and body. I politely deflected, telling him I was just there to focus on my job and take care of all my tables, not socialize. But he was very persistent. When he flagged me down for the third time in an hour, leering at me, I had to be more direct. "Sir, I'm flattered. I'm just here to do my job. Please don't ask me again." I said it, nicely but firmly while maintaining eye contact. He got huffy and shrugged, but finally dropped it. I figured that was the end of it and went on my busy shift. How wrong I was. My shift finally ended around midnight. Exhausted from being on my feet all day, I quickly grabbed my coat and purse from the break room and headed out the back, exit into the alley. Stepping into the chilly night air, I tugged my coat tighter around myself, just wanting to get home to bed after this long day. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, squinting into the shadows, and saw him, that customer who had pestered me all night. My heart started pounding as I picked up my pace. So did he. I glanced back nervously a few times to see he was still there, always the same distance behind. Panic flooded my veins. There was no one else around at this hour. I broke into a run down the alleyway, zigzagging through side streets. Once I reached the road, praying I could lose him or find other people. But each time I looked back, he was still shadowing me. I realized I wouldn't make it all the way home without him catching me, or worse. Spying a 24-hour coffee shop on the next block, I rushed inside. "Please call the cops," I begged the stunned staff. "I'm being followed." They quickly locked the door, while dialing police. Peering outside, I saw the man pause outside the shop when he realized I went into the building. He paced around, glancing angrily through the windows before finally heaving up and disappearing around a corner. The police soon arrived and took my statement. They said they'd patrol near my apartment, but without knowing who he was, there was little else they could do. I knew I was on my own now. This stranger knew where I worked and could show up again anytime. The entire walk home, I was jittery with adrenaline, starting at every sound. I expected the man to leap out and grab me at any moment. Relief washed over me when I finally got inside my apartment and double-locked the door. But I still didn't feel safe. Paranoia had set in. What if he was waiting somewhere outside? What if he was the dangerous type who would try to break in during the night? I barely slept, listening for any odd noise. In the morning, knots of dread formed in my stomach as I got ready for my next diner shift. I didn't want to go back there, but I needed this job to pay rent. The pepper spray tucked into my bag offered some comfort, but couldn't erase my simmering fear. The diner's familiar bells jangled as I entered, immediately triggering memories of the terror I'd felt fleeing this place just hours earlier. All day I was on edge, scrutinizing every male face for any glimpse of the stalker customer. I started asking a coworker to accompany me on breaks. Quitting time brought a new wave of anxiety. My manager, aware of the situation, escorted me to my car. But once alone inside the locked doors, that feeling of being hunted returned. I drove different routes, took new precautions, knowing my stalker was still somewhere out there. Weeks passed with no sign of him, and slowly I started to lower my guard a little. I managed not to think about him as much, though I was still cautious coming and going from work. Then one evening as I was getting into my car in the diner parking lot, there he was again, leaning casually against my driver's side door, eerily calm. "Hey there, didn't mean to scare you the other night. No need to be afraid. Just want to talk," he said casually, as if this was a normal situation. My blood turned to ice. Any progress I'd made in feeling safe again these past weeks unraveled in an instant. I knew then that this man would keep escalating his twisted infatuation with me. He was the predator, I was the prey, and he would keep tracking me until I found a way to make myself invisible. But until then, I'd constantly be glancing over my shoulder wherever I went, listening for those familiar footsteps to sound behind me once more. Like as I knew it had changed. I wondered if any woman in my position ever felt totally safe again after being targeted like this. But all I could do was remain vigilant and hope the police could eventually build a case for a restraining order before things got worse. For now, I was on my own against this unknown man who had fixated on me for reasons I could never understand. Wherever I went, I'd be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day he inevitably appeared again. Because to a true stalker, I was prey he had no intention of releasing. It all started with a seemingly innocent Instagram message from a stranger. I never expected replying to it would lead to me being stalked and terrified outside my own home. I was used to getting the occasional message from random guys on my account. Usually I just ignored them, but this one seemed friendly enough at first glance. His profile showed a normal-looking guy who appeared around my age, early 20s. No obvious red flags or anything alarming. He complimented my fashion style and sense of humor in my posts. Asked questions about my hobbies and college major. I replied politely to be nice, not thinking much of our brief conversation. But then he started getting more personal. He wanted to know details about where I hung out, my relationship status, if I ever got lonely. I tried to deflect his increasingly probing questions, but he persisted. He claimed we had so much in common and should go out sometime soon. I told him. Directly, I wasn't interested, but he kept messaging me daily anyway. I was getting creepy vibes at this point, so I stopped replying altogether. Blocked his account. Didn't think much more of it until a week later. After class one day, I was walking home along my usual route back to my off-campus apartment when I noticed a guy up ahead who looked familiar. As I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was him, the overly eager Instagram guy I had blocked. He waved and said, "Hey, I was hoping I'd run into you." I was completely freaked out, realizing he must have tracked my general location using campus-related hints in my photos. I walked faster, not looking at him or responding. But he tried to keep pace with me, attempting casual small talk. Kept asking if I wanted to grab coffee or lunch sometime, acting like any other normal college guy into a girl. But I knew this was no chance encounter on the street. My mind raced with how to lose him as he continued shadowing me. When I turned a corner, I broke into a sprint, praying I could make it to the safety of my apartment before he tried anything. I didn't dare look back to see if he was actively chasing me. My lungs burned as I ran the last 3 blocks and rushed up the steps to my door, fumbling with my keys. Slamming the door shut behind me, I quickly turned the lock. My hands shook as I peered out the living room window down at the street below. There was no sign of him outside my building. I hoped he didn't know exactly which unit I lived in. I went room to room, making sure all curtains were tightly drawn so he couldn't look in. But I still didn't feel safe here. The stranger now knew roughly where I lived and what I looked like in person. He could try to follow me again anytime. It was a long, tense, sleepless night. I kept imagining him lurking right outside my first floor apartment. Would he try to break in during the night? For weeks, hypervigilance and paranoia ruled my life. My walking routes to campus constantly changed as I watched for any glimpse of the stalker. I debated reporting the incident to police, but what could they really do with such little information to go on? No photos, no name, nothing concrete except my vague description of him. But I hugely regretted ever replying to that initial Instagram message and being too polite when he first got invasive with his questions. Just when I finally was starting to relax a bit weeks later, it happened again. Coming home from class one evening, there he was once more loitering right on the sidewalk near my apartment building. My heart froze in my chest. Fight or flight kicked in as our eyes met. A flood of adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could try to confront him, threaten to call the cops if he didn't leave, or I could run. As he started swiftly walking toward me, I turned and sprinted down the street as fast as I could. I didn't look back even once, just focused on getting somewhere safe. Once back inside my apartment with the door securely locked, I knew it was time to take further action before this escalated anymore. I immediately filed reports with campus security and the city police. They said they would increase patrols near my building and could escort me on walks home for a while. For the next several weeks, I jumped at small noises and kept mace attached to my keychain anytime I went out, but I remained hypervigilant, changing my daily routines. Often. This time, I also blocked his account on all social media and made my profiles totally private. Gradually, the almost paralyzing fear diminished a bit. I managed to stop envisioning his face around every corner, but part of me still wondered when, not if, the stalker would show up again someday. Because to someone fixated like him, time and distance mean nothing. I realized I had become prey to this predator who was living inside the seemingly harmless online world I thought I understood. Now nowhere felt completely safe, knowing his empty eyes were still watching and waiting for me to reappear somewhere. This experience taught me stalkers take advantage of polite social norms and are master manipulators. I had to stop being nice, stop engaging, and put my safety first when alarm bells went off. Still, he saw me as a conquest to be pursued no matter what I did, and that meant looking over my shoulder wherever I went, hoping I'd never again see that familiar face appear. I should have trusted my instincts after that first date with Brad. He seemed a little overly eager, but was nice enough at the time. Had I known that it was a glimpse of the obsessive stalking to come, I never would have agreed to see him again. At first, the barrage of texts from him after we went out was constant, but not too unusual. But soon the onslaught of messages and calls got out of control, like he was keeping constant tabs on me. Then came the unexplained gifts showing up on my doorstep. Jewelry, perfumes, chocolates I had casually mentioned liking once in conversation. I never gave him my address. That's when the initial unease really blossomed into full fear. Asking him firmly but politely to leave me alone only made his unwanted attention worse. He started showing up outside my office building at the end of my workdays, pretending to just be passing by. Said he happened to be getting coffee near my gym most nights. When I left, it was no innocent coincidence. The final straw was the day I noticed highly suspicious activity on my social media accounts. Pictures zooming in on background details that revealed my location. Messages about my schedule posted only for me to see, passwords and settings. Changed when I knew I hadn't done it. He was clearly hacking my profiles to monitor me without my knowledge or consent. Desperate for help, I went to the police with printouts of all the evidence I had gathered thus far, but without proof of any overtly threatening behavior or direct physical violence. They said there was nothing they could really do. They told me to block his number, make my accounts private, and come back if escalated. Like I hadn't tried all that already. I was being relentlessly stalked, and the law couldn't protect me. From then on, after realizing I was truly on my own, I refused to be alone in public anymore. I made friends act as chaperones and accompany me everywhere like bodyguards. Varying my daily routine and habits didn't deter Brad at all. He always managed to track me down somehow anyway. At night, every small sound outside or in my apartment building made me jump from restless paranoia. This terrifying new reality went on for seemingly endless weeks. I became a shell of myself from the unrelenting stress of constantly looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. Finally, I had enough and mustered the courage to confront Brad, face to face in public, telling him in no uncertain terms to leave me alone forever, or I'd go back to the police with more evidence. The strangely calm, empty look in his eyes that day still haunts my memories. He just laughed at my threat and said smugly that no matter where I went or what I did, he'd always find and follow me. A worthless piece of paper like a restraining order wasn't going to stop true love in its tracks, he claimed. It was clear there was zero reasoning with his dangerously distorted mindset. Realizing the local police were utterly useless to protect me, I went rogue and started doing extensive research online about stalking behavior and victims' rights. I knew I needed to compile irrefutable evidence of escalation if I had any hope of getting an order of protection someday. Anything to conclusively prove I was being maliciously stalked and my safety was at risk. It was the only avenue left that I hadn't exhausted. I installed security cameras all around the exterior and interior of my apartment. Saved every unwelcome text, voicemail, email, and letter, documenting each unwanted run-in or sighting with date and time-stamped photos. I had trusted friends and co-workers write dated witness statements about all the alarming stalking behaviors they had observed. It took an incredibly stressful month of constant vigilance while compiling a massive mountain of dates, records, images, and testimony, but I finally had a case. Substantial enough that the police could not ignore or brush aside again. By then, I was an anxious, paranoid mess from the unrelenting harassment, barely sleeping, and jolted by nightmares when I did. But the restraining order was finally issued at long last. For about 2 weeks after being served, the stalking activity seemed to temporarily stop. I left quiet again. But I knew Brad's deeply unsettling obsession with me would not end so easily just because of a court order. If anything, the legal threats only agitated him more, barely an inconvenience to his twisted goals. As I had logically expected all along, he soon resumed the very visible harassment, openly and flagrantly violating the restraining order as if taunting me and daring me to try to make him stop again. The tangible evidence against him piled up faster than ever this time around. I supplemented outdoor cameras with a new high-tech home alarm system and started taking self-defense classes to be as prepared as possible. The second time I meticulously presented my heavily documented case against Brad to the police, they had no choice but to properly act on my behalf, especially when I showed them the unhinged, graphic 40-page manifesto he had sent me delusionally detailing our future life together and his vengeance plans if I continued to resist. This time, the court finally issued the maximum available punishment for felony, stalking charges instead of just a basic protection order. But the psychological damage was already done. My innocence and foolish sense of safety were shattered, replaced by hypervigilance I might never shake. At least now when I glance over my shoulder during a quiet moment, I can walk a little bit freer knowing my determined stalker finally got the actual legal consequences he deserved. If he comes for me again someday, I'll be ready and know exactly what to do. I won't be an easy victim next time. As a single mom, it felt good to meet Paul, another parent for my young daughter's elementary school who seemed so friendly at first. But then things took a disturbing turn when he started showing up everywhere we went. At first, it was just casual conversations at pickup time about parenting. We realized our kids were in the same first grade class and got along well. Our daughter was shy and had struggled making friends, so I was encouraged she had bonded with his son. He was always very nice, even offered to help if I ever needed babysitting or someone to pick her up from school. I exchanged numbers thinking it was helpful to connect with other parents. But soon, he started texting me quite often asking personal questions about my work schedule, where we lived exactly what our normal routine was day to day. It felt increasingly intrusive, but I tried to be polite at first, thinking of my daughter who was now friends with his son. Things gradually got weirder when he would just happen to show up at the same grocery store, park, and restaurants we were at. He always had an excuse, saying he forgot something at the store when he saw us there, or that they just came to this park often too. What a funny coincidence. He'd make small talk and I'd hurry away. My gut was telling me this was more than mere coincidence. The final red flag for me was one day when we ran into him at the store again, and he casually asked how my daughter's sleepover with her new school friend was going that weekend. But it was not public information. She had quietly told only a couple of close classmates about it at school. Yet here was Paul bringing it up when he clearly just happened to bump into us there. I started to feel really unsafe. He was obviously keeping tabs on us and tracking our daily patterns and routines without our consent. As a single mom, my child's safety and well-being came first above all else. This creepy behavior had to stop. I finally confronted Paul calmly but directly in public one day when I spotted him in the parking lot near school, making it clear he needed to please leave us alone and stop following us everywhere. He pretended to look shocked and hurt by the confrontation, claiming it was all just friendly coincidence. But I stood firm, looking him in the eye and repeating my concerns. For about 2 blissful months after that, life felt relatively normal again. My daughter and I felt comfortable getting back into our usual routines, going to our favorite parks, and shops without constantly scanning for Paul. Those couple months were such a relief, I had hopes the issue was resolved. Then about 2 months later, it slowly started up again. Just glimpses of him at first. His car driving behind us on the street, his face across the store parking lot, his silhouette hanging around the outer perimeter of the playground when we were there. I immediately started diligently keeping written records of each new unsettling Paul, citing, building an evidence case. I also installed a visible home security system, got outdoor cameras, and told select friends and family what was happening in case anything escalated. I hated feeling like a prisoner in my own home again, but knew I had to take every possible precaution and really restrict where we went in public. The police said they couldn't definitively do much yet without tangible evidence of overtly threatening behavior towards us. It was frustrating, but I knew we were essentially on our own against this unpredictable man who had fixated on us for reasons I would never comprehend. But I'd do absolutely anything necessary to keep my daughter safe. The hypervigilance and paranoia were exhausting. For months, we changed up our daily schedule often, took different routes to school and activities, barely left the house except for absolute necessities. Carefree days playing freely at the park were replaced by my daughter sensing my fear any time we set foot outside. I felt like I was failing her childhood by living in fear. That's when I decided to become proactive instead of cooped up and afraid all the time. Any school event, I volunteered to chaperone, keeping eagle-eyed watch for Paul in the crowd. Any store or activity, I scoped out the location first before deciding whether it seemed safe to go in. If he ever appeared anywhere, we immediately left. Finally, after months of this, he made a pivotal mistake. I was able to capture clear, indisputable video footage on my phone of him blatantly stalking us around the perimeter of a crowded county fair one night. His physical proximity, the exaggerated way he tried to hide and look around for quick escape paths when spotted. It screamed malicious ill intent beyond any doubt. I finally had the tangible evidence I needed to pursue getting a restraining order against him. Presenting that chilling footage, the police could no longer try to brush off my concerns and claims of being stalked. For the first time in over a year living in unease, I began to feel genuinely empowered again rather than constantly terrified. Maybe someday we will be able to relax and trust the world again completely, but I know I'll never see it exactly the same way after going through this ordeal. As long as Paul is still out there obsessed with us, I'll be constantly watching over my shoulder everywhere we go. But now, finally, I was ready to fight back properly to reclaim our lives. I refused to be afraid any longer. I thought the breakup with my girlfriend Anna after 2 years together was mutual and civil at first. We'd gradually grown apart after the initial honeymoon phase ended. I was ready to move on solo, though the split still stung. I never could have expected it would unleash such a dark, deeply obsessive side of her. At first, it was frequent tearful, pleading calls from Anna begging me to take her back and give her another chance. I calmly but firmly explained I had already emotionally moved on and thought this was best for both of us in the long run. Then came the constant barrage of angry, accusatory texts that would arrive at all hours. She lashed out claiming I had cheated on her or abandoned her when she needed me most. I eventually stopped responding altogether, hoping she just needed more time to process the painful breakup on her own. But her unwanted fixation on me only intensified. She started showing up at my office, insisting we talk things through in person right then. When security had to remove her from the premises multiple times for causing a scene and disturbing the workplace, she just caused an even bigger spectacle in the parking lot instead, yelling that I had ruined her life. All my coworkers were gossiping and rumors were flying. It was beyond humiliating. The first time I walked out of the office building after work to find my tires violently slashed and the paint viciously keyed on my beloved car, I knew this situation was far more ominous than just the bad heartbreak of a typical failed relationship. She had clearly become dangerously unhinged about the split. The barrage of unhinged late-night phone calls and texts from her grew increasingly, threatening in tone, raging about all the ways she planned on making me regret ever leaving her. She said I didn't know who I was dealing with. I told her clearly and unambiguously that any further contact or harassment from her would be considered stalking and I'd go to the police. But rather than deter her as I'd hoped, it seemed to only add fuel to her obsessive campaign. The isolated car. Vandalism incidents turned into rocks and bricks violently thrown at my home. Windows in the middle of the night on several occasions. I installed security cameras, but the police said stalking was difficult to prove with what little evidence I had so far. The creepy gifts and intensely affectionate notes and letters she left in my mailbox or taped to my front door made my skin crawl. Ropes to bind us together eternally. Scented candles to set the right mood. A dead, mutilated bird left on my porch. So, you can't fly away from this. It repulsed me knowing she had been right outside my home while I slept. Her intimate, detailed knowledge of my daily activities and conversations was even more concerning. She would send me disturbing emails every few days outlining everywhere I had driven, what I left for and returned from work, where I stopped for my usual morning coffee, who I talked to, and about what. She was clearly tracking me or my devices somehow. My frustration mounted that I felt powerless to make the torment stop. This surreal nightmare went on for months that felt endless. My life became totally consumed by anxiety and constantly looking over my shoulder everywhere I went, rather than feel defeated by the relentless stalking, her ongoing disturbing. Obsession only made me more determined and committed to finding a way to legally make it permanently cease for good. I kept meticulous dated records of every incident, every breach of my privacy. Photos, screenshots of unhinged voicemails, archives of hundreds of text transcripts. I started writing down any time I spotted her car near mine, saw her shadow lurking outside my home, or noticed her watching me from afar in public. I was gathering evidence to build a case for when the police finally agreed to properly intervene. When the deliveries of mutilated dead animals left at my home like some satanic ritual started escalating in frequency, I invested in high-quality security cameras all around my property and filed for an emergency restraining order. The police agreed to finally increase patrols in my neighborhood, but reminded me that orders of protection are often just symbolic paper that a truly determined stalker can find ways around if obsessed enough. For about 2 weeks after being served the order, I felt cautiously hopeful when Anna seemed to vanish completely with no trace of her anywhere. Maybe she had somehow snapped out of it and moved on with her life. I let myself believe. My rigid routine slowly started to relax as I tentatively decided not to let all-consuming fear control my every move anymore, though I remained vigilant. That fragile illusion of peace and safety was shattered instantly late one night when I groggily awoke to the sensation of Anna standing calmly over my bed, gently stroking my face and whispering that we belonged together. No piece of paper could tear us apart. I screamed at her to get out and frantically called the police. But again, she had vanished like smoke by the time they arrived. Her frightening invasion of the sanctuary of my home was the final straw. I knew beyond any doubt the restraining order meant absolutely nothing to her warped, unstable mind. Much more drastic, tangible action had to be taken or I'd never be free of this hostile and dangerous obsession. I immediately changed all my locks, set up motion sensors, and got blackout curtains. Hated that I had to completely upend my normal life when I wasn't the one, clearly in the wrong. But I knew the priority had to be making it much harder for her to monitor, or get anywhere near me again. I consulted a lawyer about my options. It still took the police weeks more to finally catch Anna in the act of attempting to break in late one night, thanks to all my upgraded home security measures. She was arrested on the spot that time, to my tremendous relief. I never should have brushed off my creepy coworker's inappropriate comments and behaviors at first. I tried to be polite and give him the benefit of the doubt when he constantly made remarks about my looks or repeatedly asked me out on dates, despite me rejecting him multiple times. But I quickly learned that dismissiveness and playfulness can dangerously feed into obsession. It all started with lingering, wandering touches that invaded my personal space. Anytime we had to interact. When I firmly asked management to intervene on the mounting harassment, they dismissed my concerns, said I should be flattered by the attention, and that I was overreacting. I felt completely powerless and alone. The unwanted barrage of notes, gifts, and flowers being delivered to my desk daily only escalated, even when I clearly and directly said I wasn't at all interested in him. Romantically, he grew increasingly possessive of me, irrationally raging if he ever saw me casually chatting or laughing with any of our male coworkers. My pleadings for help and complaints about his alarming behavior continued to fall on deaf ears. The final definitive straw that forced my hand was coming out to my car one day to find a sophisticated tracking device cleverly hidden underneath it. My safety and privacy had been undeniably compromised by someone with unsettling resources. I refused to remain another day in such an unsafe, unsupportive work environment and immediately quit despite needing the job. Big mistake, because rather than escaping the disturbing harassment by leaving it exponentially intensified now that I was isolated and vulnerable without even the minimal protections of others around me. Almost instantly, he started calling me obsessively at all hours, angrily demanding to know my exact whereabouts, what I was doing, and who I was with. When I dodged his invasive questions, he grew more enraged, accusing me of betraying and abandoning him after all he had done for me. Lengthy, unhinged emails painted vivid, chilling pictures of the ways he fantasized about punishing me for cruelly leaving him. I told him plainly and unambiguously to never contact or attempt to approach me again in any manner, or it would be considered criminal stalking. But of course that did nothing to deter his escalating fixation. When outright demands failed to get him to stop, I blocked his number and email. But he always quickly found new ways around the blocks to force me to continue listening to his disturbing threats and requests to meet up. Changing my own phone number and email address provided brief short-term relief from the constant terror of harassment. But soon enough, he was right back to waiting menacingly by my car after work shifts or following me around various stores on the weekends. Security guards could only make him reluctantly leave the premises. They had no power to actually put a stop to the stalking altogether. My adrenaline spiked entering and exiting work every day, anxiously scoping the parking lot, knowing he could be lurking anywhere, ready to confront me. I varied my daily routine erratically, took new unpredictable routes to and from work, and avoided going anywhere alone, even for basic errands. But his looming, watchful presence always seemed to find me like a shadow I couldn't escape no matter what I did. Just when I was finally getting desperate enough to look into filing for a restraining order, the nightmare escalated to a new level I didn't think was possible. He showed up entirely unannounced at the small new office job I had gotten specifically to escape him, strolling casually right up to my desk with a slight smirk. My blood ran cold, seeing him there in my safe haven. He could clearly get to me anywhere at any time. I immediately ran straight to HR in a panic, and they uneasily escorted him out without involving the authorities. This had officially gone too far. As soon as he was out the building, I filed a detailed police report on the incident and zealously set out compiling every piece of evidence I could of the relentless stalking. Photos, voicemails, eyewitness accounts. I wanted irrefutable proof that I was being maliciously targeted, tracked, and approached without my consent on a regular basis. I needed law enforcement to get involved before things got even more out of hand and dangerous. Meanwhile, I became hypervigilant and proactive about my personal safety 24/7s. Taking self-defense classes, always carrying mace and personal alarms, installing upgraded home security measures and cameras. I hated that my entire life had become completely uprooted all because of this disturbed individual's twisted obsession with me that would not abate. The paranoia was beyond exhausting both mentally and physically. The sheer mountain of evidence I provided over months finally got my stalker arrested, to my tremendous initial relief, but my fleeting sense of hope was extinguished when he was released after just a couple weeks, and the threatening late-night phone calls immediately resumed. The legal system had utterly failed to protect me too. In his clearly mentally unbalanced mind, I belonged to him and him alone. He would never willingly let me have my freedom and peace, no matter what I did. I realized all I could truly control myself was how I reacted to his harassment, rather than let him. Make me a perpetual frightened victim always looking over my shoulder. I embraced vigilance and took back whatever power I had left. The extensive documentation of every stalking incident continued meticulously and relentlessly in case another opportunity for his arrest emerged. Video cameras monitored my home 24/7. In the meantime, I consciously worked on focusing my thoughts on all that was good in my life instead. I refused to waste one more minute of my precious time worrying about where he might be lurking or what's sick. Obsession might drive him next. This was my life, not his to terrorize as he saw fit. Someday, I do still hope legal justice will ultimately be served, and he will face real consequences through the system meant to protect people like me. But it's also possible he will continue to haunt and torment me forever if the law does not intervene. Either way, I will not surrender my freedom, dignity, or sanity to his harassment ever again. That final choice is mine and mine alone, not his.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.